Hello friends, how are you? I'm Mari Thurger, and today I'm going to talk about the ancestral worship, which I believe isn't solely or exclusively about bloodline. This is in fact a response to one of my latest videos about the subject of animism and spirituality, which was a video answering a couple of questions from the followers of my Instagram. On that video, my response to the very first question caused a little bit of confusion, anger, and provocation. And to my great disappointment, I found out there are a couple of religious fanatics in this channel with very twisted ideas about what spirituality means. So, before I start this video, I want to leave a little message. There were only a few that did not quite catch the meaning of my words, and naturally, misinterpretations caused people to twist and corrupt my words. Even so, I have talked to those people to clarify some things, and let's just say some understood my point. But a tiny fraction is in such a fervent and unhealthy denial that got me genuinely worried and sad. I'm not worried and sad about me. I'm sad for those people and worried about the fact that after all this time of human existence, there is still a lot of dangerous ignorance towards certain subjects that causes a great negativity to those people who are in constant denial, and such negativity spreads to others because ignorance is a disease. I'm sad because I found out that certain people are in this channel not to learn and share knowledge, but because they were trying to find confirmation to their delusions and narrow-minded ideas. And when the truth or other ideas and perspectives go completely against their limited thinking, they bark like wounded, confused, and scared animals. I think you mistake me, because clearly some people think I'm in some sort of agenda and try to bind them to just one single way of thinking, and I'm trying to destroy heritage and culture in general. Well, you clearly haven't been paying attention, because if you have been in this channel for the past 2.5 years since I became a YouTuber, you should know that once in a while I purposely contradict myself, because that's the sort of approach we should have in life. If we do not contradict ourselves and only follow the same line of thought or the same path for the rest of our lives, we do not evolve and we stagnate. And worse, the world continues to evolve, everything advances, but if we keep on with the same ideas, we stay behind. You mistake me because I'm not here to feed lies and fantasies, and I've always tried to have a neutral approach to everything I share in this channel. I don't let personal beliefs, especially politics, influence the work I've been doing in here. You clearly mistake me for those certain people who forcibly want their own personal beliefs to be the only possible truth and the way things were conducted in the past by our ancestors. I'm here to help you. I'm not here to give you the truth about everything, and I don't hold the truth or knowledge of every possible subject. I'm here to give you certain ideas and perspectives to help you to have a critical thinking and to have different perspectives that might help you to reach the truth for yourself. The things I say are not the only possible truth or the only possible perspectives and interpretations. I'm not here to bind you to anything. On the contrary, I'm here to help you to question everything you think you know. Doubt everything. Question everything. I don't want you to see me as your spiritual guide or the only possible source of information. I want you to listen and gather information, and I want you to seek more information Read more, explore and research and make comparisons. And I find it funny that some of you are always so confused about me and you don't know how to call me or how to label me. You are trying to figure it out what is my personal spiritual path. Don't do that. That's a horrible mistake. Some people just absolutely love labels, to put a tag on their forehead and call themselves this and that. The fact that you put a label on yourself and place yourself on a little shelf creates huge limitations in your way of thinking and how you interact with life itself and others. When you label yourself something, you restrict yourself to that path alone. People love to say others are sheep and they blindly follow a certain religion, but then they have this same approach in a variety of realities. Maybe you are not a sheep, but maybe possibly you might be a horse or a donkey with blinders that can only see forward and going straight ahead without questioning your very existence and purpose. When you label yourself something, you are on a single path and you are only following that path, and you will miss a lot of information and knowledge in all the other paths around you that you prevent yourself from exploring. Some people call themselves Ancestral and will only follow those specific ideas. Others call themselves Christians and will only have that approach in life. Why should we follow one single path? That's what spirituality means, to walk different paths and learn as much as we can, gather as much knowledge as we can. You don't specifically need to follow one single path. I understand people have the need to belong to a group, feel special, feel like they are above all others, and they are in the right side and truth is with them. But in the end, you end up just like those you call sheep and blind followers. People have called me all sorts of things, from Ancestral to Christian, from pagan or heathen to Jewish, communist, fascist, racist and anti-racist, neo-Nazi, universalist, to Zoroastrian, agnostic, Satanist, Wiccan and whatnot. Don't try to figure out in which path I'm in, because I'm not in any specific path. I told you before, I do not follow any path but my own, and my path is about exploring every possible thing there is. You can't even begin to imagine the amount of things I have studied and explored precisely so I can make comparisons and open up new horizons and have a broader sense of what surrounds me. I've told you many times, listen, be attentive to what surrounds you and listen and learn. I don't really care what you call me. I don't care about your opinions about my own person, be that good or bad, because the truth is, you don't know me. You have absolutely no idea who I am and where I've come from and how long I have been at this. Only I know myself, and that's what matters to me. Any other external ideas about my person don't matter to me because they are not the truth. I am who I am, and only I know it. And I repeat, I'm not here to give you only one possible truth, only one possible way of thinking. The reason why sometimes I contradict myself is because I try to be neutral and give you a lot of information and different perspectives and interpretations, so you can have a critical thinking, so you can train the capacity to question everything. Many people fall into the mistake of never questioning what they think they know, and they never question their own actions. Listen, a person might have done something in a certain way for the rest of their lives because, well, they thought it was the right approach according to their own beliefs, and because they have never had access to any sort of information that tells them otherwise. That person will pass on to his child the same way of thinking and the same actions, and that child will pass that to the next generation, and on it goes. At a certain point, people will not even question the origins of things and why they behave in that manner, why they are taking those actions. Because at some point they think it's normal to do that and to think in that way, because their ancestors have been doing that all the time. And that's what was passed on to you. But just because it looks normal doesn't mean it is right. Some people fail to question their own actions and why they do the things they do, and then end up unconsciously like sheep, doing only that, following only that path, having only one single line of thought. And just to finalize this message and get to the subject of this video, I know there is a growth in paganisms nowadays, but that doesn't mean we have come to a point of great enlightenment and there is some sort of spiritual awakening. We are still on a very primitive stage, and you will understand that in a couple of centuries. Well, maybe not, you will be dead, sorry. But I see a lot of people trying to transport their modern ways of thinking into the past. Worse, I see people cannot make a clear boundary between politics and spirituality. If you want politics in spirituality, that is called religion. And religion is an organization with only one single narrow idea about some aspects of spirituality. Religion only picks up a couple of ideas that serve as justifications for their actions to aggrandize personal power. Some people's modern ideas of spirituality, greatly corrupted by centuries of religious oppression and by 19th and 20th century extreme political approaches, are not the same ideas of your ancestors. The way we think nowadays in our modern society isn't the same way our ancestors thought in the past. Your modern belief system isn't the same of the past, of the ancestors you love to profess to have their guidance and you follow their old ways. I find it funny that people only care about a very specific group of ancestors that they never met and know nothing about, that can suit best their political ideas. How's that for hypocrisy? I find it fascinating the fact that people only want to follow one specific line of thought and then claim to know the ways of the past, of people they don't know anything about, of people who did not have the same ideas or belief systems. Whether you accept it or not, you have had all sorts of ancestors with all sorts of religions and belief systems you do not identify yourself with. And you follow a path that only gives you certain ideas and perspectives, and then you end up not knowing about a great portion of information from your ancestors. Many people only want to follow the path that best suits their personal political ideas and twisted notions of heritage, race, and culture in general. The highest form of ignorance is when you reject something you don't know anything about. Remember that. Certain people underestimate the old cultures, producing a very trivial idea of their religious beliefs. Because of that, the majority of people has the impression that the main part of the old spiritualities was focused solely on things similar to modern age problems, ideas, and belief systems. Much of the knowledge we have today of ancient societies seems much more to be interpretations of modern people rather than understandings of ancient religions. There is no reason to believe that we nowadays have a more advanced and sophisticated way of thinking than our ancestors did. There is no reason to believe that we nowadays are on a higher intellectual or spiritual level than our ancestors in ancient times. I'm worried about the ignorance of some people because that is leading to an almost abandonment of the development of the spiritual and the intellectual. I'm not here to force you to accept a single way of thinking. I'm here to help you out, to have a broader perspective of everything that surrounds you, and so you can develop critical thinking. Communication is essential to pass information and share knowledge. But I'm finding it hard to try to help some people because no matter what I say, they keep in denial, in a strong and quite unhealthy denial. And there's nothing more I can do about that. And these people will end up falling into darkness and take others with them. It's that very darkness, ignorance and intolerance that I'm trying to fight against. Not that I feel like some sort of messiah or some hero to come to the rescue, but because I care about people. Or rather, I care about the importance of fighting against ignorance and doubt, because that causes a lot of fear and hatred that leads nowhere. The fight against ignorance is important for the general well-being of the planet itself and all life, because it was ignorance that made us lose our respect for nature, and we lost respect for ourselves. And we end up here, in a dying planet, because we stopped caring about what really matters, and we are more concerned which religion or which God is better than the other. Ridiculous. Things had to be said. Now, let's start this video. So, the cult of the ancestors is not solely about bloodline or biology, and let me tell you why. And again, this perspective is not the only possible interpretation. This is just to give you some different ideas that might help you out. When we think about the ancestral worship, we think about the people of the past and their belief systems. And so we try to follow a certain spiritual path in concordance to our ancestors. I do not deny that DNA contains very useful information about our past and our ancestors. And much of that information comes from trauma and certain experiences that makes us act on impulse and on instinct. Ancestral memory is real. It's indeed in the blood. But to say we follow a specific path because our ancestors did it is quite inaccurate, because our ancestors had plenty of belief systems and religions. So when you follow just one specific religion because it better suits you, you are denying a great portion of your ancestors. You are denying the worship of the ancestors to the great majority of your own ancestors. When you follow a specific path, you follow it by personal choice, not because the ancestors told you to. Otherwise, there would be thousands of people, hundreds of thousands, telling you to worship all sorts of gods and beings and follow all sorts of paths you don't agree with, or you don't have the slightest curiosity about such paths. It's true that we have certain inclinations to do certain things and follow certain lines of thought, because it is information printed or stored in our DNA. For instance, your parents knew how to play the piano, and with luck that information is in your DNA, and you will easily play the piano because it is memory printed in the DNA. But when it comes to spirituality, it's a wondrous variety of realities, and it may or may not have to do with bloodline. Because if you follow something because it's in the blood, then you have no free will at all. There are thousands of external influences that will make you choose a specific path. But if you use your mind instead of restricting your choices to the illusion that it's solely in the blood, you will start to explore a lot more than your ancestors ever did. There are thousands of people that grow up in a specific background whose personality is influenced by a lot of external factors: social, economic, religious, and political factors. Personality has a great control over you. But what truly is important is your individuality, the very thing that makes you who you are without the external influences, your very essence. People who stick to their personality have the tendency to follow the same things they grew up with and the same ideas. It's inevitable to be influenced by the atmosphere or the environment we grew up in. But with a strong individuality, a person chooses other paths. There are plenty of people I know that were born in specific religious backgrounds, ethnical groups, countries, languages, culture in general, and they grow up to be the exact opposite of what they have grown up with. People who make choices not because of external influences or ideas that and because it's in the blood and my community did this and my ancestors did that, but because they made a choice. The great majority of people follow certain spiritualities because they are either running away from previous religious oppressive systems or because they already grew up in that spiritual background, or because they have been told stories when they were children or already adults and curiosity woken inside them and they tried to follow those ideas. Certainly, in tribalisms, many people will follow that path and they will tell you, it's in the blood, our ancestors did it. But they are following that spiritual path because not only they grew up in it, but because in this modern world of industrialization and materialism, there is the need for minorities to preserve the old ways. But the old ways are not preserved because it's in the blood. The old ways are preserved because knowledge is passed around and people keep doing it. No one will lose a certain cultural heritage out of nowhere. A certain cultural heritage will never be forgotten if there is but one single individual that has the information about it and passes it around. That's why it's so important to keep on communicating and share knowledge. I know people from Portuguese, who are absolutely the best at Inuit native traditions and spirituality, from the peoples of the Arctic Circle. I know people from Spain who are in absolute concordance with Native American spiritualities. I also know people from China who are outstanding in performing magic and rituals of pre-Christian Scandinavian religion, etc., etc. Why? Was that in their blood? No. People felt a connection, a genuine interest, a great curiosity about it, and it called to them. And so they have studied hard. A long process of research, a long process of being in contact with it, to perform the spirituality in the right manner, by trying and failing until they succeeded. When people think it's in their blood, they get lazy because they think they are entitled to that spirituality and they are special and the spiritual path will be easier, and they think they are very much in concordance with it. But they aren't, and that's an illusion. You can only achieve such concordance with the spirituality, with the spiritual reality, if you work hard enough. Because if you think you are special and entitled to a spirituality because you had ancestors following those old ways, you are not giving the proper value nor the respect to that spirituality and your ancestors, because you think it will just be given to you so easily. Your ancestors worked hard for their old ways and fought hard to keep them alive. And now you come and say it's in your blood and that's it, easy. To give the proper respect to your ancestors and to the spiritual paths you think they were onto, and the spiritual path you have chosen for yourself, you must work hard for it. Study, explore, research, experience, live it, until you find a link and that you are in concordance with it. That's why so many people feel absolutely disconnected from the paths they have chosen and don't know what to actually do, because they put themselves a label they think they are entitled to and are lazy and just sit there waiting for the spiritual to come to them. But what can we say in terms of spirituality about the reincarnation belief? Let's take a look. In many neo-paganisms, there is a strong belief in reincarnation. Reincarnation is the subject of many religions. It's a global phenomenon, and obviously in some religions is more present than others. But there are always traces of the belief in reincarnation, transmigration of the soul. I have had hundreds of people, actually now it's thousands of people, who one way or another asked me if the Old Norse peoples believed in reincarnation. Yes, there are traces of that, and I've already talked about that in this channel. So indeed many people, especially neo-pagans, have this tendency to believe or be inclined to the subject of reincarnation. But today I'm not going to delve on that subject, and I'm not going to tell you my own perspectives on the matter. The point is, there is a general belief in reincarnation. And I find it amusing that a lot of modern pagans believe in reincarnation, but my statement of ancestral worship not being about bloodline doesn't make sense to them. So that indicates a lack of true understanding about what reincarnation actually means. In reincarnation terms, the body or matter exists, but it's just a vessel of the spiritual, or rather, of the everlasting consciousness, which is the true self. The body or matter is limited to this physical reality, and its shape and appearance is bound to the laws of this reality. But the spiritual is limitless. And this is one of the reasons I say the images of the gods are one of the worst traps that destroys faith. People think of the divine as if the divine were like us and as if we ourselves were like the divine. People create too much boundaries in their own thinking. If people understand that we are all living spiritual entities belonging to a never-ending spiral or network of spiritual interactions, then physical appearance means nothing. We are made of the same stuff of the gods and all other spiritual entities across the cosmos. We are pure consciousness and energy manifested in matter, across time and space. In the most basic understandings of reincarnation, if you believe that you die and will come again to inhabit another body, you will be in a body that was born in this world. Therefore, that body is linked to specific ancestors. The blood in you is something of the physical reality, something that gives life to the matter that you require to walk about. You will have specific ancestors, and if you follow a specific spiritual path because it's in your blood, you are following and are bound to a reality produced by matter. and not by the true self, which is your consciousness residing in that matter, in that body. So let's say you follow a specific spiritual path because it's in the blood and your ancestors call to you. You follow that spiritual path through the rest of your life, throughout the rest of your life, and then you die. If you believe in reincarnation or the existence of an everlasting consciousness, then when you return to another body, you will be born and inhabit a new body of a different ethnical group than the one you previously belonged to. You have just returned to this reality on another body, which automatically gives you other ancestors. Are you going to follow your old spiritual path of your previous ancestors, or are you going to follow the spiritual path of your new ancestors? If you believe in reincarnation, then you believe that you will always inhabit different bodies of different ethnical groups, which automatically gives you different ancestors every time you return. So if you follow a spiritual path because it's in your blood, in every reincarnation you follow different spiritual paths according to that ethnical group of the ancestors of that ethnical group. So tell me, the spiritual path you have chosen is because your ancestors did it? It's because it's in the blood? Or you were inclined to a specific path because the memory of that specific path resides in your everlasting consciousness, and in truth your belief system and the cult of the ancestors you feel a connection with are just memories printed in your consciousness, which people call spirit or soul. That's why I said in other videos that people choose the spiritual path that calls to them, not because it's in the blood, but because it's in your everlasting consciousness. This, of course, if you believe in reincarnation. Now, look around you and you will understand that the spiritual transcends religions and civilizations. We see this in archaeology. I am an archaeologist, and as one of you rightly pointed out, there are certain symbols that can be found in disconnected societies throughout history. People who have never had any connection with each other. Impossible, unless, of course, they travel through time. And the identical symbols, or similar or with the same meaning and religious connections, appear all across the world, which might indicate, indeed, that the spirit transcends religions and civilizations. And those mean nothing because of the everlasting consciousness that will reflect past experiences on the mind when it inhabits a new body. Or this might be the case that we are absolutely connected with each other, and the cult of the ancestors is the cult of virtually everyone of the past. What calls to you also resides in the subconscious of other people, but they just feel more inclined to another spiritual path because it's what's more active in the conscious. And that doesn't make you special because you have special ancestors, since your ancestors are virtually the same as everyone else. The spiritual path that calls to you is in your subconscious, which then is reflected in your conscious. If you follow something because it's in the blood, you are restricted to the realities given by the matter. You are restricted to the information of the physical. But if you follow a spirituality because it calls to you, because you follow your own mind and make your own decisions and choices, you are following what's in your subconscious and is reflected on the conscious. This is what I mean when sometimes I say we must work to unlock the hidden secrets stored deep in our conscious. But this perspective is only applied if you believe that the soul, spirit, or everlasting conscious exists, which you forcibly have to believe if you believe in the ancestors and their influence upon us. So, if you believe in reincarnation, but believe the ancestral worship is about biology, you are contradicting yourself, because your ancestors do not live in your blood. What's in your DNA is information. Ancestral memory, yes, but information of the past, a code that gives you a lot of informations and indications and gives you all the physical traits you have, including diseases. It belongs to the physical. Your ancestors are not in your blood if you believe they are spiritual entities. Ancestral memory is one thing, ancestral spirit is another. So, a few heathens reduce ancestry to biology alone, the cult of the ancestors. This is actually a modern idea, this idea that the ancestors are in the blood, and has nothing to do with old religions and spiritual perspectives. Like I said, a lot of people try to transport ideas of the present into the past. The idea that the ancestral worship is a matter of bloodline started during the 19th century and with political nationalist ideas, in the perspective that certain populations were pure, certain races were pure, which has inspired racist ideologies in the past decades. An idea that never existed in the past. Again, I find it funny that it's those, unfortunately, more linked to Germanic paganisms that still follow this perspective. And I find it funny because you clearly never read the sources, the Old Norse poetry, for instance. Otherwise, you would not believe the cult of the ancestors was a question of bloodline. If you read the accounts of how ancient societies and other ancient cultures in general thought about the ancestral worship, you would be in shock to realize it was never about bloodline and keep the race pure. I've told you in this channel, there are plenty of Norse sagas that tells us that the essence of a person could live on, not with procreation and having descendants solely, but by giving one's name to another person. That person would carry out the name of someone, which means the person would inherit the skills and attributes of the person who gave it a name. An individual's personal essence and fate, ancestral power, urlog, and the spiritual entity itself could be inherited by someone named after them. It wasn't a requirement to be related to that person. In fact, even the child of an enemy could be adopted by someone, and that someone would give his own name to the child, thus beginning a new ancestral line. Not by blood, but by connections, external to biology. So, ancestry in many Old Norse sagas could be determined by intentionally naming someone. This is a case of spirituality, so why are people trying to reduce it to a biological matter when the cult of the ancestors has always been a spiritual approach? To people you don't even have to be biologically related. As I've said in the video about the cult of the ancestors, I have given you specific classical examples of Romans adopting children and giving their names and they became their descendants. These adopted children would continue the cult of the ancestors, worshipping the ancestors that adopted them. There is no bloodline in here, no consanguinity connections. When a Roman woman gave birth, at least among wealthy families and nobility, it was up to the father to accept the child or not, to grab the child up in the air and say, "I recognize you as my child," or "I do not recognize you as my child." If the father did not recognize the child, the father would put the child literally on the streets. And whoever wanted would take the child. This child could be adopted by someone, become a slave, or being eaten by the dogs. But if the child lived, that child would perform rituals to the cult of the ancestors. But the child did not have a father anymore, nor a mother, but would worship those who might want to help, who might have a connection with the child, which means the child could even worship the ancestral family members of the parents that adopted her, or even friends. The cult of the ancestors was about emotional connections people created with each other. We clearly have this in Slavic ancient societies, which unfortunately I never developed much in this channel, but I would like to on a future video. But just to quickly tell you, the ancestral worship among Slavs, especially Western Slavs near the Germanic borders, was all about the tribe, not the family, but all the families that belonged to the tribe and outsiders that were incorporated within the tribe. Indo-Europeans were very much involved in ancestral worship. They worshipped legendary heroes, people of great renown, people whose deeds exceeded what was considered normal. They worshipped people they had no biological connections with, because there were those whose great deeds made them have a special place in prayers and worship, and later they became gods. Ancestral worship gave birth to the worship of many deities. Most Slavic peoples, at least the ones we know of, which are a lot, did not believe in the spirit of a single individual, but the collective spirit. As long as the tribe survived, their spirit would live on. The cult of the ancestors to the Slavic peoples of old was about the spirit of the tribe, the group of people of different families and even of people from outside that they accepted in the tribe. Yes, migration was a thing, and many tribes accepted outsiders, people of other ethnical groups, and thus they started to belong to the ancestral worship when they died. Which is why in archaeology we find different ethnical groups in graves of specific cultures some people nowadays believe to be pure. But more on Slavic peoples on another video. If you believe ancestral worship is about biology and in the idea of keeping the race pure, well, I'm afraid there are bad news for you, since genetics constantly find that there is more genetic variation within specific racial and ethnic groups than between different groups. Ancestral worship in traditional cultures had a great emphasis on a continuous personal ritual practice with the objective of strengthening relationships with ancestral figures. In the various sources, these rituals were either towards specific individuals or to a broader sense of ancestral collective spirit, which, by the way, included a lot of animal spirits, plant spirits, spirits of place, and so on. So again, if ancestral worship was about bloodline, bestiality or zoophilia must have been quite important. I'm only joking, obviously. But animals and plants were included in the ancestral worship. You see why it's important to understand about a subject first before jumping to conclusions? How can you have arguments against or in favor of something if you don't know anything about it? Anyway, as I've said before, people love to give labels, but ancestral worship wasn't about labels. but about connections. Racial categorizations wasn't a thing in the past. Ancestor worship was never about abstract categories and placing people into groups just like the ones we call today as white or black or Asian, and so on. That's a contemporary thing, not a thing of the past. Ancestral worship was about relationships that connected people to a broader sense of community, to a spiritual network. But bloodline was important in a specific aspect in the ancestral worship, indeed. And those of you who think it's about keeping the bloodline pure will not like this at all. So better just leave now before you have an heart attack or something. The merging of different ethnic groups was very important for the ancestral worship. To merge lineages, to merge various ancestors, to strengthen one's connection with the ancestors, to have different ancestors, important and powerful ancestors. This is the only time bloodline enters, and it's the very thing modern racists hate the most. When the truth hits hard and shakes those very fragile foundations of an obsolete belief system, it's painful to watch. Whether you accept it or not, the truth is the same. Melding lineages of different ethnic groups was seen as a unification of ancestors, creating a single web of ancestral spirits. The matrimonial union was an expansion of the ancestral lineage. Ancestral worship, even to this day, in many societies that still maintain this activity, was also about the worship of people that we feel a strong connection with, not by blood, but because we see them as role models and we require their help. There is also the case of people that feel a stronger connection with those they have chosen to be their family and not the actual family members. In the past, this was also part of the ancestral worship, to continue to praise those who were important to us, that do not have to forcibly be biologically related to us. Ancestral worship has its basis on animism, and someday I might talk about that, which will certainly put an end to modern religious perspectives that have been greatly corrupted by contemporary political nationalist propagandas. Or maybe not, because some people clearly want to stay in the dark, in a fervent denial, and will end up frustrated and alone. Ancestral worship in the past, in the old cultures, certain modern neo-pagans like to profess they follow, but clearly know nothing about it. But fortunately, it's just a minority. The ancestral worship was about interconnections and relationship that went beyond the boundaries of skin color or nationality. When you let go of the narrow idea that ancestral worship is reduced to biology alone, an infinite number of doors will open up before you, and it will strengthen your spirituality. Because in the previous videos, those who argued that ancestral worship was solely about bloodline, all I saw was denial, hypocrisy, lack of well-structured arguments that lead to pathetic, unhelpful, and destructive contradictions. Don't transport your modern way of thinking into the past, because it wasn't like that at all. And by being incapable of making a separation between politics and spirituality, it will ultimately destroy the freedom and creativeness of our own consciousness. Now, I repeat, what I said in this video is just one perspective, not the only possible truth. But think about what was said in here, and remember, the highest form of ignorance is when you reject something you don't know anything about. Alright, my dear friends, I hope you have enjoyed this video and that it might have been useful. If you really enjoy it, I will ask you to please share it if you feel that it contains useful information that others might hear and it might help them. Share it in all of your social media and give it a thumbs up or on this video or however you say it. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next video and as always, tack för idag.